Hey there, geeks and geekettes. Today I'm going to rank the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. So, as I said, Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Now, I'm not going to pull all of these out because they're not individual DVDs, it's just one massive case. And I don't own the remake because I don't like it. I don't like a few of these films, but they're in with the box set. So, to review the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, not the easiest thing because there are some really bad movies in this franchise. I love the character of Freddy Kruger, but they did ruin him towards the end. Now, the original movie was the first horror movie I ever watched as a child, and when I say a child, I was maybe 8 years old. My uncle was watching it. I kept bugging him that I wanted to watch a film with him and that I wouldn't be scared, and he let me. And Fred Kruger absolutely terrified me. I was quite young, but I was old enough to understand that this guy was killing people in their sleep, and it did a bit of a number on me. As an adult, he still creeped me out a bit, to be fair, for a long time. So, but unfortunately the franchise made some very poor moments, and it's these very poor moments that start my list. So, number 8, Freddys Dead, The Final Nightmare. So, this was marketed as the final installment of the series with the promise of actually killing off Freddy. What they actually did was kill the franchise altogether because this film was so bad. It was directed by Rachel Talalay, and she'd produced a few of the previous sequels. But after her working on the franchise for so long, how did she mess this up this badly? The film tries to cram in more comedy than all of the previous entries, and the film really suffers for it. It completely took away any horror from Freddy. It took away his scariness. I mean, at one point, he rides a broomstick dressed as a witch cackling. It looked like the cheapest thing ever made. It was just awful. The film introduces Freddy's daughter named Maggie, and it also explains how Freddy got his powers when he was burned alive, but it's pointless. This film is unwatchable for me, and it totally ruined the Kruger character. Absolute garbage. Number 7, and I don't think this is going to come as a surprise, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010, the remake. After 16 years of Fred Kruger being away from the big screen, he was due a comeback. Autumn of 2010, Samuel Beer directed the Nightmare on Elm Street remake titled A Nightmare on Elm Street. The film replaced Robert Englund with Jackie Earle Haley, and that casting actually got me quite excited because I'm aware of the guy's other work, and I thought he could pull off Fred Kruger. Unfortunately, the awful script, the terrible CGI absolutely ruined this movie. They didn't do any practical effects, it was all CGI. Freddy's face was CGI'd and it just didn't work. It looked cheaper than the rubber mask that Robert Englund won? War. I can't speak again. It's also too similar to the 1984 original. There was not a lot of originality brought into this movie, and if anything, this movie sort of proved that Robert Englund was irreplaceable. I think Jackie Earle Haley, with the right script and the right sort of director, could have done a far better job, but this movie was just, it was no good. The cast away from Freddy were junk. I've seen some of these people in other films or TV shows and they're actually decent actors, but I suppose if you've got a script that's that bad and doing a rehash of an old movie, then they're not going to be so invested in it. And it's a shame because the world at this point was ready for Freddy. See what I did there? Number 6, A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Child. So The Dream Child picks up immediately after part 4, which was The Dream Master, and it tells the backstory of Amanda Kruger. It shows the birth of Freddy and the horror that soon follows. The film does have some graphic death scenes. One of the most memorable being Freddy stuffing food into a girl's mouth until she suffocates and explodes. And I think he turns Alice's boyfriend into like a cyborg motorcycle hybrid thing. This film was rushed out. It clearly had a lower budget than the sort of preceding films as well. And again, it's another garbage movie. There are some elements that are cool, but Freddy was still on that slippery slope into becoming a comedy character. And that started on A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. So, A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. This is my number 5. It was released in August 1988 and sees Freddy return to take revenge on the Dream Warriors. Patricia Arquette didn't return as Kristen. An actress called Tuesday Knight did. And she wasn't Patricia Arquette, we'll just say that. And this movie was sort of the point where the decline of Freddy started. There are some cool moments in this film, but this was definitely when the focal point moved to comedy. But despite Freddy having sort of a sense of humour in this movie, it's still dark. Freddy Krueger has got a dark sense of humour. But this was also the sequel where Freddy Krueger was resurrected by a dog peeing on his grave. And that sort of sums up the quality of these movies from this point onwards in the franchise. They just took a waz on Krueger. And it's a shame. Some cool elements, but really not the greatest film. I think this film was directed by a guy that had only ever done music videos before, and it does show it's quite a fun watch. It's quite bright and out there. Some good ideas, just doesn't really land that well. Leading me to my number 4, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddys Revenge. So after the success of the original movie directed by Wes Craven, which was a masterpiece, New Line wanted to create a franchise out of Freddy Krueger. And that, unfortunately, was with or without Craven. It only took a year for this film to be released, which is obviously the series just cashing in and rushing. And this movie, it gets slated a lot, but I quite like it. I mean, yes, it does have the subtext that apparently wasn't done on purpose. Yes, it was. And there are comedic moments, but at the same point, the film's quite dark. There is a scene with like a killer parakeet. It's a bit silly. There was the dancing scene with Jesse, which was probably the most cringeworthy thing ever put to film. I think they were trying to do a take on Tom Cruise's Risky Business, and it did not land in the slightest. For comedy value, it's great. But this film is dark. This is sort of... They tried something different, which I liked as well, where Freddy had possessed the child and made the child kill for him. And there was a new way to bring Freddy into the world after being defeated in the first one. And I kind of liked that. But the subtext that I was on about, it goes over the top and it's in your face to the point where the gay coach gets killed by his balls. Actually gets killed by his gym balls. I don't know what they were thinking for that. But there is a really cool sort of body horror scene where Freddy actually bursts out of Jesse. You see Freddy's eye in the back of Jesse's throat, and then Freddy's claws come through Jesse's hand, and then he basically rips through him and kills a guy he's sharing a room with. It's a great scene. There's another scene in the movie with the pool party where Freddy's out in the real world, and I know people slated that because it broke the rules of the original movie, but I kind of liked it. Watching Freddy Krueger go absolutely nuts, just slashing a pool party full of teenagers to death while the parents are completely oblivious upstairs. I enjoyed it. Also in this film, you get Poundland's version of Meryl Streep. I'm not saying that to be horrible to the actress, but she was put in this film purely because she looked like Meryl Streep, but she does a good enough job as the final girl. So my number 3 is the third movie in the trilogy, and I know that's going to annoy some people because this film tops a lot of people's lists. Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. It's a fan favourite. Originally, Wes Craven was going to return to write the script to this sequel, but apparently his script was too dark, so New Line went in another direction with Frank Darabont of Walking Dead fame and Chuck Russell. Dream Warriors is sort of notable because it was the return to the franchise for Heather Langenkamp as Nancy, and because of the creative deaths, and then the way the Dream Warriors fought in the Dream World, because each of the Dream Warriors had their own powers in the Dream World to fight back against Freddy. A lot of people, their favourite scene in this movie is Welcome to Prime Time, and then I can't finish that because I'm a family-friendly channel. I wish I could, because it's a pretty awesome scene. There's nothing I dislike about this movie. Freddy did start to be a little more funny, but it works in this movie. His one-liners are dark enough because of his actions. And the Dream Warriors actually defeat Freddy until part 4. For some reason, they just finished them off in the 4th one. This film has some emotional stakes as well, and there's quite an emotional few scenes in there. Freddy is genuinely quite scary, and there is a scene where Freddy uses a kid's veins to use him as a marionette puppet to kill himself, and it turns my stomach. Even now, that scene turns my stomach. It's done so well. I absolutely love this film. However, it is third on the list. So my number 2 is Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Now, Wes Craven did not want his movie to become a franchise. He did not want sequels, and he returned to the franchise for this 7th installment called Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And like the original, this had an ingenious plot, an original plot, and such a great idea. The basic premise is that the actors of the original movie come back, except for Johnny Depp, and they are playing themselves. So Robert Englund isn't Freddy Krueger, he's Robert Englund. Heather Langenkamp is Langenkamp. Wes Craven is in the movie. And basically, it starts with Heather Langenkamp getting stalked by someone, or thinking she's being stalked. And that plays into her fear of the character of Freddy Krueger. And through the cast and director's fear of the original character they created, he comes into their real world. And it was such a cool idea. It was the first meta horror film that I remember. And I swear, if this film had come out after Scream, this film would have been a much bigger deal than what it is. It's definitely overlooked. Freddy Krueger is once again back to being scary. The fact that he was in the real world was another sort of take on that original movie, and it really does work. There are some awesome scenes in this movie. Freddy Krueger is a demon in this film as opposed to a character, and the film really does work to it. So Heather is basically being hunted down by Freddy Krueger. She's got to fight him in real life to protect her son Dylan, who the actor also played Gage in the original Pet Sematary. He's brilliant in this movie. So while the film doesn't surpass the original, it brings Freddy back to his darker roots, and it put a fresh spin on a series that had, I'm sorry, been a joke for far too long. So for me, Nightmare on Elm Street was the only movie to be a #1. Obviously written and directed by Wes Craven, starring Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, Heather Langenkamp as Nancy Thompson, and Johnny Depp's first movie. So this film was about a child killer. It's hinted at that he did more to kids, but it's not so on the nose as the remake, and they should never have done that. Fred Krueger, leave your imagination be the scary part of Fred Krueger. You don't have to spell it all out for us. We're not stupid. So he was a child killer that was murdered by the parents of Elm Street. And basically he comes back for revenge against the parents by killing their children in their sleep. The children are obviously a little bit older in this, they're teenagers. So Nightmare on Elm Street was an incredibly unique idea. And it put New Line Cinema on the map. A Nightmare on Elm Street featured a very scary Freddy Krueger. It featured quite a strong cast of children, or teenagers as they were then. There's some great practical effects. I mean, the one scene that will always stand out to me is the scene where he comes over the bed through the wall, and I think it was done with a sheet and a backlight. And I remember my auntie saying that film, even when she goes to bed sort of 20 years later, she looks up and she still looks up to check that he's not coming through the wall. This film got under everyone's skin back in the time, or back in the day. It got under my skin when I was a kid, but I was far too young to watch it, and then I watched it as a teenager thinking I was a big brave boy, and it still got under my skin. The fact that this guy was killing people in his sleep, and at the time I was that age, you know, the second time I watched it, and I'd seen all the sequels by the time I watched it the second time, and Freddy wasn't scary to me until this movie again. This movie created the ultimate boogeyman. He was far more scary than Jason. He was far more scary than Michael Myers. The fact that Freddy spoke but would cut his own sort of fingers off and taunt, and there were scenes in this movie just straight out of nightmares. Literally, like the girl in the body bag, the centipede coming out of her mouth, and the whole pass. The whole pass scene was quite funny, but still dark enough not to be too funny, and it didn't take you out of the film. The only thing I don't like about this film is the ending, and in the film's defense, that ending was not the ending that Wes Craven wanted. So the ending where the mum gets pulled through the door, which is a little bit too on the nose and didn't make any sense, wasn't Wes Craven's original idea. Originally, Freddy was going to disappear when Heather turns her back on him, Nancy turns her back on him, and then the film, in Wes Craven's mind, would end with the lid of the car coming up with the stripes, and then leave everything else up to us, the viewer, because he knew we weren't stupid, but somebody in New Line wanted the mum being pulled through the door just to make the ending open, so we'd get a franchise. But even with that ending, this is still, it's quite possibly my favourite horror film of all time. It definitely changes position, this and the original Halloween, as my favourites. So even with that ending, this still is one of my favourite horror films. If not, it is my favourite horror film, because it was the first film that proper scared me. This and the original Halloween sort of trade positions if I was like listing my favourite horror movies. So yeah, but this film got under my skin. Englund was absolutely terrifying as Freddy Krueger, and the actual death scenes in this thing were incredible. Obviously, Nancy's friend in the bedroom with the bed where she's dragged up the wall and across ceiling screaming. This film was bloody, it was gory, and Fred Krueger sort of relished in the scaring of people, and it made the movie all the better for it. So that was my ranking of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Let me know in the comments below your own rankings, because I'm pretty sure most people will put Dream Warriors as the top spot. Not for me, personal taste and all that. So let me know in the comments down below. Before I go, I'm planning on doing a sort of a special video on Halloween. I'm going to do my 31 movies on the 31st, because across the Halloween, Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street movies, there are 31 movies in total, and I'm going to rank the lot of them. I was planning on watching one a day and doing a video a day in order, but it'll never work because I can't sit through some of these movies. So you can probably work out which ones are going to be sort of bottom, but then sort of the final Freddys Dead, The Final Nightmare and Halloween Resurrection are going to be fighting it out for bottom space. I'm not sure which one will go there yet, but yeah, that's my plan, is 31 movies on the 31st. So hopefully guys, if you're enjoying these rankings, you'll tune in then. So guys, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you all guys soon. Bye.